We're live.
Hello and welcome to another episode here of the Cowbell Kingdom podcast, live on cowbellkingdom.com, also streaming live on YouTube if you're watching it that way through Google Hangouts. And then for those audio listeners who are listening afterwards or tomorrow or whatever day you are listening, we thank you so much for joining us no matter what platform and no matter what way you're hearing this or seeing this or part of it or not. We appreciate all of your support as always and are happy to have you along with the conversation. My name is Matt George from Sports 1140 KHTK, joined by my good buddy. You know him well. He is one of the main men at Cowbell Kingdom. It's Mr. Leo Beas. Leo, my friend, how you been?
Get your popcorn ready, Matt. That's all I got to say.
It's going to be a busy episode for sure, especially after all the craziness of the weekend that happened. And the sad part is we had all this craziness from the weekend, and really there was only one basketball game being played, and that game happened on Friday. But that game was plenty crazy in itself. So we're going to talk some basketball, but really most of this podcast is going to be spent talking about all the off-court stuff going on, whether it's just the off-court issues, the teammate involvement with one another, how the play of some players and how that's affecting them both on and off the court. And then most importantly, the recent rumors involving so many trades and so many things around the Sacramento Kings team. And there's really a lot to touch on with that because three different players, Leo, have been rumored to be in now trade conversations.
What's new, Matt?
I know, really, what is new? But the first being Willie Cauley-Stein. Omri Caspi was thrown into the mix in the middle of the weekend. And then today, DeMarcus Cousins' name came up. And that's really the what's new because it's not like we've heard that around this same time almost every single season for the past 5 years. So we'll touch on all of that. And we're just really going to dive right into it right now. Again, you can join the conversation if you're watching on YouTube live right now. We would appreciate you jumping in. There's a chat on the right-hand side. We can see that directly. You just ask us questions or jump in the conversation, share your opinion. We can see that directly. We can try and respond to you if we can, incorporate it into the show any way that we'd like. We are very capable of doing that, and we want to do that. So please don't be shy. Jump in on this conversation. Make your voice heard because we definitely want to hear about it. DeMarcus Cousins the rumors about Cousins are the cream of the crop. So we'll save that for last. We'll start with Willie because those were really the first rumors that came up. But it's going to be hard to talk about each one of these three rumors in its own, in particular, because they all mesh together and they're all part of just a general, I call it agenda filling by the national media because that's what it is.
That's nice. I'm going to be a lot more clear about that because it's ridiculous, man. I'm just tired of this nonsense, Matt.
Well, can we really expect any less though? The Sacramento Kings have always been low-hanging fruit. There's no surprise there, and that's not really going to change just because of who the Sacramento Kings are and how much they have struggled. But what I think is interesting is I don't think it's much of a coincidence also, although some people want to make it seem like it, that all this comes out after we have our first national media game, which the Kings blew a major lead against a Lakers team, which was a tough loss that we saw last week when the Kings had a 19-point lead in the second quarter against the Los Angeles Lakers, just utterly fell apart. You and I had steam coming out of our ears, Leo, because we were so frustrated just with the effort of the team, how things turned out. They did bounce back nicely. They lost in Portland the next night on Friday night, and we'll talk about that again.
Which they should have won.
Yes, and shoulda, woulda, couldas are plenty of conversations that you can have in this league, and it's been mostly shoulda, woulda, couldas around the Sacramento Kings for the past 10 years. Let's be honest. But Kings have their first game on national television. It's a TNT game, to which I went back and watched the game. I don't know if you've watched it. It was torture for me to watch it again, but the reason why I watched it is I wanted to see what the national media perspective and what the TNT guys were saying about being in the new Golden One Center. And they had a lot of great things to say about the arena itself, but for the most part, it was a very Laker-heavy broadcast. And did I expect any less? No, because the Lakers are a major market. They're a much more polarizing team than the Kings. Even if they're worse than the Kings, they still are more polarizing, than anything the Kings could have done. So I wasn't surprised it was more of a Laker homer broadcast. But the national media gets this look at the Sacramento Kings. They get this Kings game. They see an absolute collapse. They see DeMarcus Cousins being DeMarcus Cousins in the fourth quarter, melting down. They see the team just fall apart. and suddenly rumors pop up that 3 players want out or 3 players are potentially on the trading block. That's not a coincidence, Leo.
Well, what I did watch was Shaq and his nonsense at the half, and I had people texting me, which I did mention in our post-game show, that I don't know what was exactly said from Shaq, and then I went back and I listened to it on YouTube, and it really upset me because Shaq, for all intents and purposes, he is a minority owner. He played against the Kings back in his heyday, and for him to come out and say that DeMarcus Cousins is pretty much going to get traded, or look, the way he stated his sentence was, I got an update from Bleacher Report, and I selfishly, because I had nothing else to say, said what I said, which was just bad executed for one, and for two, it was totally not accurate.
And I think it's interesting that you bring up Shaquille O'Neal, because obviously anything that he brings up or he says is going to create a lot of traffic and is going to get a lot of viewership, especially being on that TNT broadcast team. But Shaquille O'Neal is about as much of an owner and involved in the Sacramento Kings front office and decision-making and ownership team in general as I am if I were to buy stocks of Starbucks right now. His name was attached to the team, and yes, he's paid some money towards the team, which we thank him for that, to help the team stay here. But other than that, his helping DeMarcus Cousins is non-existent. His involvement in this franchise is zero. How many games has he shown up to in the past 3 years for the Kings? Zero.
Maybe.
Has he been anywhere near the new Golden One Center throughout the construction process or it being open? Zero. Shaquille O'Neal is not a part of this franchise. So for him to continue to say that they're his Kings, I can appreciate, and I like that because it's publicity. But then again, when he goes out and says things like he said in that broadcast, to where like he has inside sources with the organization,
he doesn't.
It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
I mean, Shaq, if you're going to throw out rumors, at least execute them in a proper way where it's believable. It was a complete joke, a travesty. And as Grant always says, the TNT crew, for the most part, isn't really prepared.
And a lot of time, I mean, we got to give the credit to where the credit is due. The TNT crew has a very, very difficult job of traveling around the entire United States, doing one game a night and a different game to this night, completely different teams, completely different scenarios, completely different situations in terms of being in their season. That's a tough job to do. Yes, they're surrounded by all the assets they could possibly want. And yes, they are all professionals, but it is hard to keep in touch with all of what is really going on in a particular market. And that's why we as Sacramentans have such a tough time reading and hearing all these articles and rumors coming from national media, because they're not here. They more see the turmoil from this one game they see against the Lakers, and then they hear the comments of other general managers and other NBA executives from outside of the Sacramento Kings organization, and they make assumptions and reports and write stories based off of that. That's the frustrating part. Now, I'm not saying there isn't validity to what they're saying or what they're reporting, because a lot of times where there's smoke, there's fire. And I completely believe that. I understand that there are trade rumors involving DeMarcus Cousins, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Omri Caspi, because I'm sure there are NBA GMs with interest in all 3 of those players that have at least picked up the phone and called Vlade. But just because there is interest there and Vlade is listening to the calls does not mean that that trade is any closer to being done than it was before the call was even made. And I think that gets lost in translation, Leo.
And I think a lot of these NBA executives must love the app Yik Yak, because I guess they're always anonymous. And if you're going to pinpoint exactly that DeMarcus is going to get traded 3 months from now or a month and a half max, because if not, he's going to lose value, please just stop it. If you're going to go on record or say that, go on record and be a man about it and come out, because you clearly don't know what Vlade is thinking. Nobody knows what Vlade is thinking, but Vlade has told us that he is not interested in trading DeMarcus Cousins. Why is that so difficult to understand? So when these guys go on record anonymously and they leak this out to this guy, which I forget his name, the guy that posted a story on the Sporting Good
Mark
News,
Spears, I think. Not to the Sporting News, but Mark Spears was the one that reported about the Willie Cauley-Stein and Aubrey Caspi deals. I know that.
Yeah, I was talking about
DeMarcus specifically.
Let me see. Yeah, his name is Sean Davini from the Sporting Good News, which, again, if you go on record saying that this is going to happen a month and a half from now, put your name on it. It's as simple as this. Klay Thompson was very, very clear when that anonymous source called them cowards, but yet wouldn't attach his name to it. Please be a man about it and come out and say it. All you're doing is shifting the market and putting pressure on Vlade to make moves that he doesn't have to make. So in essence, you have no ethics for that. And again, it goes back to what I've been saying and what you've been saying, Matt. Journalism ethics are dead, and there are very few who still believe in ethics and good journalism.
I think we have to backtrack a little bit because we're putting food on the table without properly setting it, just to let everybody know who's not as familiar with the conversation that we're having. And we'll focus mainly on the DeMarcus Cousins article that came out today because that's the most fresh. An article came out via the Sporting News that said those DeMarcus Cousins trade rumors, which have happened for the last 5 years, finally are imminent and real. And that's according to a couple different NBA executives. They're listed as NBA executives in the article and then called NBA general managers later in the article itself, although they're called executives at the very beginning. Whether they're general managers, whether they're executives, whether it's a janitor in the Memphis Grizzlies organization, it doesn't matter because the validity doesn't change. And it's, again, like I've tweeted out constantly again and again, there's always been rumors about DeMarcus Cousins, but a deal has never been done because Vlade has not allowed any deal to take place that he didn't see the Kings were getting proper value in return. Every single general manager in the league, if they have a brain, which they all do, is going to see the situation going on in Sacramento, see the turmoil between DeMarcus Cousins and the organization, DeMarcus Cousins and the coach, DeMarcus Cousins and the fans, whatever has it, and they're going to try and use that to their advantage by potentially taking Cousins off the hands of the Kings while giving up as little in return. Exactly. It's just called trade. It's done forever throughout history. You're going to want to acquire the best asset you can while giving up as little as possible. So every general manager is looking to the Kings, looking to DeMarcus Cousins and Vlade Divac and thinking, how can I get this deal done? Whether Vlade's instigating the trades or not, obviously nothing has gotten done. Why? Because Cousins is not available for the, I don't want to say trash, but for the role players and for the minimal deals and minimal return, which is what the Kings really have been offered. Vlade may have too high of a ceiling on DeMarcus Cousins for what he expects to get in return. That could be hurting him in the long run. But ultimately, in regards to these rumors, that's exactly what's happening, is that there is no validity to it because nothing is happening.
Yeah, and sorry, and ultimately, DeMarcus Cousins this season has fought through adversity already. He's fought through so many contact plays, so many non-basketball contact plays where guys go at him without the basketball, and he has kept his cool, and the organization has applauded him for that. So things are going well. He's getting along with the entire coaching staff, with all of his players. So for this to come out after a very tough loss, which they should have won that game if it wasn't for that last call where DeMarcus was fouled and for that offensive foul on the guy that was guarding DeMarcus Cousins that pushed off Rudy Gay. So these are calls that have to be made. And again, I hate to regurgitate this, but refs need to be held accountable. But anyways, that's a different story for later on in the show. But DeMarcus Cousins has kept his cool this season, has been great. So for this story and all these executives and GMs to come out all of a sudden and say and predict the future is beyond ridiculous, Matt.
We're getting a lot of great feedback here on our comment stream, and we have a couple questions from Nicholas Castle and Ryan Baracco, and we see both of those. So stay tuned because we will touch on those maybe in the middle of the podcast, maybe more towards the end. But some of the feedback that we're getting from Dan B, people don't know anything about what Vlade is thinking about. I think that's very true. We don't even know what Vlade is thinking about, and that's good. That's good. We don't want to know what Vlade Divac is talking about, even if we want answers, because it's not his job to appeal to us. It's not his job to please us. The way he pleases us is by putting a successful product out on the floor, not by telling us, not by telling the fans, not by telling NBA executives around the league. He doesn't have to tell them what he's trying to do in his organization that he runs. It's like this gigantic information bubble that everybody has to be a part of, and that's what Twitter has done, and that's what these the more modern way of storytelling and modern journalism, where quick access right there, this information pool is just there, and I can stick my head into it and try and absorb as much as I can before I suffocate myself. Vlade doesn't have to appeal to that. Now, what does he have to do? He has to put a winning product out there. Obviously, he hasn't done that yet. So where you can call into question whether or not DeMarcus Cousins as a trade legitimacy, or whether or not DeMarcus Cousins being traded is legitimate, you can question that in terms of would it help the team win? And that's something that we have yet to see, or is up to Vlade to decide. A lot of people have different opinions on this or that. Obviously, DeMarcus Cousins is a phenomenal player. He's the best big man in the league in both my and your opinion, and pretty much everybody else's opinion around the NBA. His one area of weakness, his kryptonite, if you will, is his attitude and is his frustration. And teams have capitalized on that in two ways. On the court, players are going after him and making him angry because they know they can't stop him. Look at the Lakers game. The first half, Timothy Mozgov, no matter who they threw, Julius Randle, they could not do anything to stop DeMarcus Cousins. And then they got in his head, and then they took him out of the game. So the players do that on the court. And then off the court, NBA executives and GMs take his anger and take his frustration and look for a way to capitalize it, not by getting rid of the guy, but by trying to bring him in. It's all a gigantic game of chess, and a lot of people are wondering if Vlade really knows what he's doing. And so far, the fact that we don't know what he's doing, I think, is a positive, because if we did know what he was doing, that would show the leaks in the organization. That would show that he didn't have a firm control over what was going on. And that would show even more instability than what we saw 2 or 3 years ago with Pete D'Alessandro.
Well, Vlade has said that he does not intend to trade DeMarcus Cousins, and he's been very clear with us, the media, at least locally, the past 3 months. That doesn't mean he won't trade DeMarcus Cousins, but when someone goes out and says that he's at a month and a half tops, and then says that he'd rather keep it anonymous, the NBA has to start cracking down on these buffoons, because all that does is it puts pressure on Vlade, and it's a pressure that he doesn't need because it's not ethical. The same thing goes when teams can't talk to players before the actual day, right? Because it's called 10 – what is it, Matt? When they talk to players, which they can't talk to them before the actual day of free agency.
Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I know what you're talking about.
Or,
well, whatever it may be, that basically exactly what you're talking about.
I don't think it's fair to just spread all these rumors and then not put your name to it, because all you're doing is potentially shifting the market and putting the Kings in a tough predicament, which they already have by putting out all these rumors, and then the fans get into it. It's just a mess that the Kings don't need right now. They just have to focus on playing basketball, and it just seems like they never will.
And a lot of people are panicking because all these rumors are coming out so close to around the same time. And we talked earlier on the podcast about how I don't think it's coincidence that all of this is happening after the first nationally televised Sacramento Kings game, which happened to be the collapse against the LA Lakers at home. Let's be perfectly clear. The national media has their jobs to do. They have their headlines to fill. They have their sidebars to fill. So every time you turn on ESPN and you see 2 or 3 main stories on their slider, and then you see that box on the right or left-hand side that says other headlines, and there's multiple headlines from around the NBA, there's a lot of stories that need to be put in there and constantly refreshed to keep activity going and to get their clicks. Now, am I accusing ESPN or Bleacher Report or other major news companies like that of associating to clickbait? No, I'm not accusing that. Although, have they done it? Yes, everybody's done it. I mean, clickbait, it works. That's why people keep doing it. However, with all these three rumors coming out around the same time, it's national media reading into and looking into and poking around and asking questions involving players that may want out or may not be comfortable with a franchise that has been so wishy-washy and has been so unstable for the past 4 or 5 years, even since new ownership took over, really. That's what they're looking at. And they're going to try and fill that agenda. And is it an agenda that's anti-Kings? Not necessarily, but it's an agenda that is, like I said, low-hanging fruit, because it's easy to look at the disarray of the Sacramento Kings organization and pull from that and continue to fuel that fire rather than trying to maybe go around it and focus on other elements of the organization, because the fire and the drama and the trade rumors are what sell. So I don't want people to panic thinking because of this early season and now the Kings aren't doing so well and all of a sudden player A, B, and C, and D, and E are all saying at the same time, I want out, I want out. Oh, it's a meltdown of the locker room. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's 3 individual cases where national media has read into it, looked into it, and associated these rumors and leaked them and put them out there to get the kind of reaction that it's getting now.
Yeah, so what have we learned, guys? That if Sean Devaney of the Sporting News puts something on, pretty much on the internet, please don't put any thought into it, because this guy has never been to a basketball game in Sacramento. So please just stop posting all these clickbait stuff. DeMarcus Cousins, as far as what I know, is not going anywhere anytime soon, let alone before the trade deadline. If anything happens, it's going to be during the offseason next year. So
I would take what you were saying and I would kind of turn it on its head in a little bit. Don't necessarily disregard it completely, because it's always good to get that perspective just to get an idea. But my encouragement to you would be, read the article and really look at the sources and question how much of an inside scoop are they really going to have with the organization? How much do they know what's going on day in and day out with the Kings? Or are they just going off of a one night that they saw, or a one rumor that they saw online and building upon that? For example, the article that came out about DeMarcus Cousins, it's solely based off of other NBA executives and other NBA GMs. It doesn't mention one source, not one source involved with the Sacramento Kings. There's the difference.
There's a difference.
Because every single team is going to have their own view of what the Kings are, and it's going to be completely different from every other team, and it's going to definitely be completely different from what the team actually is itself, because they apply their own agendas, their own desires, and their own input into that. It's always going to be different. So nothing is set in stone from these things. They're rumors. They are speculation, and that's what people need to remember.
It's speculation, and it's like Vlade assuming that the Magic need a shooting guard, so I'm going to give up Papa Giannis for him, or it's just something ridiculous. And the worst part of it is that whenever these rumors come out, not only do you put the Kings in a tough situation, but you're not going to get anything close in return to a top 5 talent that DeMarcus Cousins is. He might not be a top 5 player, but he is definitely a top 5 talent when you look at him from top to bottom, because he can do it all on both ends of the floor. And if put in the right situation, he will succeed, and he has, like during the Olympics. And I think he will succeed here, but with so much just off-the-court stuff, it's really hard to actually do your job. So it's just real difficult, Matt. And when you see things like this, it's really discouraging. And again, in DeMarcus' defense, he's been a pro this year. I know he has 3 4th technicals, which I don't think he should have gotten that 4th technical last game, because he was pushed, and because of his reputation, he did get that 4th technical. But again, if guys are making non-basketball plays on him, there should be consequences for that.
I think we should reiterate something that we said right at the very beginning of the podcast, because we have people tuning in as we are continuing to go live, like Jose here who just weighed in. What about what Shaq said? He's a part of the organization. We talked about this, Jose, right at the beginning of the podcast. We appreciate you tuning in now, though, and joining. And it's a great question because a lot of people agree with your take because it's Shaquille O'Neal. He's on national TV. And yes, technically, he's a minority owner of the Sacramento Kings. However, like I said earlier, he is about as much of a part of this organization in terms of knowing the ins and outs and being involved in the decision-making as I would be in the company Starbucks if I went out and put $200 down and bought $200 worth of stock. DeMarcus Cousins, Shaquille O'Neal has nothing to do with the Kings. He has nothing to do with DeMarcus Cousins. He can look at the same thing we're all looking at and say the things like he said on Inside in the NBA, which was DeMarcus Cousins is a hothead.
Which was an update on Bleacher Report. That's all he did. And he executed that very, very poorly.
Again, it's the recycling of information. It's the hot take, or it's the top story or the headline that people are taking and not applying fact to, but most of the time applying their own opinion. So Shaquille O'Neal sees this headline of DeMarcus Cousins potentially being trade rumored or potentially being on the outs of Sacramento. And what does he tie into? Well, he ties in what he recently saw, which is DeMarcus Cousins being a hothead, going after Julius Randle and not helping his team win in a night where they blew a 19-point lead. It's all situational, because his take on DeMarcus Cousins is going to be completely different if Cousins scores 50 points and leads the Kings to a 20-point trouncing over the San Antonio Spurs tomorrow Wednesday night. It's going to be completely different. It's all situational. Jose, thank you so much for the question, though. We appreciate it, and that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, because Shaq does have a big basketball IQ, but not necessarily from a media and reporting standpoint. Absolutely. Rumors are very, very different than on-court knowledge.
Absolutely. Shaq is a very bright guy, actually, a great businessman. But for him to just go on air and say things like that, come on, man, you have to question what was his motive. And I think his motive was just to fill airtime, honestly, because he had nothing else to say, nothing else to add. And when Charles Barkley is missing, then you have to take on some responsibility and really fill some airtime, because that is what happened.
So 3 rumors over this weekend involving Willie Cauley-Stein, Omri Caspi. Those 2 rumors involved players directly, and then DeMarcus Cousins, which were nothing more than speculation. There's nothing involving Cousins himself that suggests that Cousins was saying he wants out. The other 2 were a different story. Omri Caspi, the rumor about Caspi was that Caspi was directly questioning his role and wanting to move on. Caspi then later came out and denied it to James Ham. And then the rumor involving the Willie Cauley-Stein trade really was denied by the Sacramento Kings organization. Now, we've seen a lot of organizations in the past have their rumors somehow leaked and then deny it to kind of save face a little bit, and then that rumor actually ends up coming true. That hasn't been the case with the Sacramento Kings since these rumors have begun 5 years ago. So until it happens, you'll have to forgive Leo and I and many of the other members of the media or Sacramento Kings fans who don't put any value into those reports, because again, we haven't reaped the reward per se. We've seen it start to be put out there, but we haven't seen the end result yet. Or we have seen the end result, and it's the same that it's always been, which is nothing. So it's not that we want to completely discredit reports that are out there, because like I believe, where there's smoke, there's fire a lot of times. And I also believe reporters like Mark Stein, Wojnarowski, anybody that is involved in that high level of journalism and NBA journalism has that big of a reputation and behind them, they're going to try and report things as accurately as possible. I like to firmly believe that. Now, a lot of the times that may not be the case, and sometimes that may be naive of me.
Yeah.
However, until there is a result, until actual fire comes from the smoke, I'm not going to pay it any more attention than I would a report of myself coming out and saying, hey, Greg Ostertag is rumored to be the next Sacramento Kings head coach.
Yeah.
I just put out a rumor right there. Is there any validity to it? You don't know. I've talked to NBA executives.
Exactly. And Nicholas Castle said, what do you think of the rumored trade of DeMarcus and Ben for Myles Turner, Ronnie Stockey, and Indiana's 2017 protected lotto pick?
No.
I wouldn't do it.
No.
But
That's probably a trade. That's probably very much like the phone calls that Vlade has been getting.
I love Myles Turner.
But for the caliber of DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah, I'm so high on Myles Turner, but I don't want to wait 6 years for him to become even close to DeMarcus, because I just don't want to wait 6 years, and I want to win now, and I want to surround DeMarcus with the talent now. So I don't want another project, even though Myles is already pretty damn good. And I would say, as far as big men, he probably ranks in my top 12 already, and he has the potential to be a top 5 big man, no question about it. But yeah, I wouldn't do that trade.
I'm going to return to something you said really quick, Leo, and then we're going to move on to some happier stuff here. You said something along the lines of you don't believe that if any validity to the DeMarcus Cousins trade rumors, if there was anything at all, that you don't think anything would come of it until the offseason.
Yeah.
I actually disagree with you there. I think if the Sacramento Kings they continue to be a dumpster fire, if DeMarcus Cousins continues to have issues, the team's not winning, and there's the same problems that we've had over the past 5 years by the trade deadline, I would not be surprised to see Cousins moved to a potential playoff suitor, because that's where you're going to get the most value in return, because there are going to be more teams that are more desperate to reach the postseason instead of teams that are trying to retool during the offseason. And almost everybody likes what they have during the offseason. Almost everybody does. Whereas you get the kind of reality check when you're 30 or when you're like 45, 50 games into the regular season. The playoffs are on the horizon, and you know that, oh man, 2 seeds ahead of me is a lot better than I am, and I'm going to need someone like DeMarcus Cousins to help me beat them or get over that hump. That's where the difference is. So I really believe, and you don't necessarily have to agree with this, but if the Kings are continuing to struggle and be a dumpster fire and continue to be around that middle point of the league, which I call NBA purgatory, which is that like 25 to 30 win range, then we could very well see DeMarcus Cousins being traded. Now, people, that's purely speculation and opinion on my part. I have not heard anything to suggest that he's more likely to be traded this trade deadline, but that's all it is. So take it for what it's worth.
Well, I don't know the last time that a superstar player like DeMarcus was traded by the deadline. I think the last one was Carmelo Anthony, I think, and I'm not even sure on that. So the chances of a star player being dealt before the deadline is very unlikely, Matt, and which is why you take a little bit more time during the offseason to construct a deal surrounding your main piece, which is why I see like a 2% shot of that happening before the actual deadline. You know, Rudy Gay might get dealt, which is a high possibility, because Rudy Gay is, like you said, he might be that piece for another team to push for the playoffs. But DeMarcus Cousins, you're going to give up a lot to bring in Boogie, and you're going to retool and then pretty much start from zero, because then you're going to have to get acclimated to DeMarcus Cousins. Whoever trades for DeMarcus Cousins is going to give up a lot, because I truly believe Vlade will not give him up for just anything.
No, he won't. And if he's smart, which he is, he absolutely will not. There's a discussion going on in our chat right now, Leo. A lot of people talking about the picks that the Kings could have had they drafted correctly or looking back. And I just want to address those people really quick. Don't depress yourself, because it is awful. Yes, I see Damian Lillard. Yes, I see Peyton. Yes, I see Klay Thompson. Yes, I see Kawhi Leonard. Yes, I see Steph Curry. So many moves the Kings could have made, which they didn't make. Don't depress yourself with it. I beg you, because it's the past. It's happened. It's frustrating, because we know that we could have had all those players, and the only player of significance that we've drafted that we're still holding on to is DeMarcus Cousins. We hit gold with that for sure, at least in terms of quality of player, but obviously it hasn't worked. don't depress yourself with that kind of stuff.
And I think someone said, what would the Kings give up for a guy like Klay Thompson? That's a very interesting question, and I've been intrigued thinking about Klay. And I saw a rumor of him heading to Boston for Bradley and for the Jay Crowder and Avery
They better
Bradley
not steal Crowder.
and the future first round pick. I hate to say it, but if I'm Golden State, I pull that trigger.
Yeah, that's a good trade for both teams. That's a tough trade to pull off if you're the Golden State Warriors, because that tandem of Curry and Thompson is really what carried you to success in the first place. So to so quickly be willing to break that up just for Kevin Durant. No, and that is a good replacement. And Avery Bradley is a phenomenal young player. He's not as good offensively as Klay, but certainly better defensively. Jay Crowder is a very underrated small forward, in my opinion, one of my favorite small forwards in the league, and someone I would kill to have as a member of the Sacramento Kings.
So you're going to get lots of defensive intensity and pretty much a future number 1 or number 2 pick, because that's the Nets pick, which I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA. So can you imagine if they get next year's first pick? Like it's crazy to think, but it's a huge possibility.
It's amazing what
that's
moves you can make.
A trade worth, it's a trade worth mentioning because it's not lopsided. It's actually a good trade for both teams. Both the Celtics get a star player in return, and then they get 2 very good players and a potential star in the draft. So to me, it makes sense. It would deepen the Warriors after losing so much depth for signing Durant. So, I mean, that's the closest thing to it that I've seen that's remotely even attractive to both teams.
Someone asked, what would the Sacramento Kings have to give up for Klay Thompson if the Warriors were really going to trade him? The correct answer is nothing that the Kings are willing to give. I don't see any chance of Klay coming here. Rudy Gay does not.
The only way is if they gave up Boogie.
Cousins would have to be involved in the deal. There's no chance that they would accept anything when Rudy Gay is the main trade piece they're getting in return, unless they were getting a cornucopia of picks, which guess what? The Sacramento Kings do not have. So don't get your hopes up on the possibility of ever seeing Klay Thompson in a Sacramento Kings jersey. I shouldn't say ever, but certainly in the near future. Because that trade is not going to happen. So I appreciate you being interested in it. A lot of other people are talking about potential trade rumors involving John Wall, because there have been reports out there that Wall is unhappy in Washington. Again,
he's
more and more reports and more speculation from around the league, and whether or not they're true, we don't know. We'll have to see. However, if John Wall was to come to the Sacramento Kings, the only way would be if the Washington Wizards acquired DeMarcus Cousins. The duo of them would not come together in Sacramento. It would have to come together in Washington. And people have talked about the potential of shopping Cousins to the Wizards and trying to get Beal and someone else in return. There's all sorts of scenarios, all sorts of ideas that you can look at. Things I'm sure Vlade has racked his brain over, whether he says DeMarcus is available or not, because these are the kind of things you have to think about when you're a GM trying to approve a team that has been in the cellar of the league for so long. But I'm getting depressed, Leo. I don't know about you, because it's a very frustrating NBA purgatory that the Kings have been in. And really, just to depress you a little bit more before we move on, it really has been purgatory for the Kings if you think about it. That 25 to 30 win rate, you're not losing enough to get a top lottery pick that can help bring you out. Because look, the Kings have been in that 25 to 30 range for the past 5 years, and look where they've picked 6, 7, 6, 7, 8. It's all been in that range. The only pick that they got that was high up was when they were the worst team in the league, and they should have gotten number 1, and they got number 4, and they ended up taking Tyreke Evans over Steph Curry. So hey, let that one sink in and sting.
And they took Boogie at 5, so 4 and 5 were, Tyreke was good. Barring injury, this guy would be right now a 2-time All-Star. I mean, he's just so talented.
The point is, Vlade has to get this team out of this purgatory, and he has to do that one of 2 ways. He either has to put the pieces around DeMarcus Cousins to get them over that 35-40 win hump to where they can attract some more attention by potentially being an on-the-cusp playoff team and hopefully bring in some more talent to help them get over that cusp. Or They have to get rid of DeMarcus Cousins, and that potentially means going down to where they can start to rebuild and try again through the draft and really be specific with what kind of players they want to bring in, take the best available and surround that with talent and start fresh, because it's going to have to be one or the other, because you can't continue just to stay in this purgatory. So just some food for thought for any of you who want to think of what you would rather see happen. Would you rather see the Kings go down and try and hit again in the draft and then work their way up that way? A lot of people would definitely say no, because based on how the draft has been in recent years for the Kings, that sounds like the most disgusting thing in the world.
You would be surprised, man. I've dealt with a lot of people over the last couple of days just saying, blow it up, just be the Celtics. But what they don't understand is that it's not easy to be the Celtics. It's not easy being just – it's not easy, guys. And for guys to say just put 4 shooters around DeMarcus Cousins, I said name me 4 shooters that would come to Sacramento.
But it may be the best thing that the Kings will have to do is going through the draft, because if you look at the kind of market they are and the draw that they have, they're not very attractive to most big-name free agents. And trades only take you so far when you have almost zero trade assets besides DeMarcus Cousins himself. I mean, just look what the Timberwolves were able to do through the draft. Yes, they got lucky via circumstances, but they also made the right plays, and they were patient to get to that point. That might be the way you have to do it in this league when you're a small market team like the Sacramento Kings. You build a young core and then build a dynasty through that. I have a hard time, and this is my speculation and my fear coming out, I have a hard time seeing a successful future with the Sacramento Kings involving DeMarcus Cousins, not because it's only his fault, but because the Kings just don't have the ability to put the best talent around him because of the market that they are in. And they're winning enough games to not get a high enough draft pick to bring someone of that caliber in right out of college. So welcome to purgatory. That's exactly what it is. And the Kings got to find one way out, and we'll see which way they choose. So, but hey, they did draft 3 rookies, Leo, and those 3 rookies are now part of the Reno Bighorns,
which they played well last night.
And they played their first game, and I know you did an article on it. I didn't get the chance to watch it or follow the game, so I wanted to give you the next 5 minutes or so, Leo, just lay out the game for us and really tell us your bright spots from it for those who didn't get the chance to read your article.
I've said this, Papa Giannis is soft, but at the same time, you have to acknowledge that the kid is 19 years old, and he yet has learned to run and dunk with a 7-foot frame. Like, it takes time to get strength, to get in shape, and we need to understand that. So, and there's people calling me, man.
Hey, that might be someone, an NBA executive, trying to get you to trade DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah. So anyways, I liked what I saw from him. Yeah, GMs are – hey, Leo, be quiet. All right, guys, I'll stop. But anywho, Papa Giannis has a nice inside touch that you really can't teach because you either have it or you don't. Yeah, he's soft. Yeah, he's European. But with time, he's going to get stronger. He's 19 years old. So I like what I saw. 15 points, 4 rebounds. He needs to hit the glass harder. He's 7'2", 7'1", legit. I get it. You need to rebound at a higher rate. I think it'll come with time. But I like what I saw from him yesterday. Malachi Richardson can just score. He is a better version of J.R. Smith when he was that age, and I think he's a lot more ahead of J.R. Smith with the potential of being something bigger, because if you think about the shooting guards in this league, which I think is the worst position as far as talent, because you can't name many shooting guards that are great nowadays. There are very few, if you really think about it, that are great. You know, the James Hardens, Jimmy Butlers, and Klay Thompsons that are great shooting guards. And when you see a guy like Malachi, he's legitimately 6'6", and then 6'7" with shoes on. And he's super athletic and just has a gorgeous shot, which I think is going to help him have a long career in this league. So if I had to choose a rookie right now that would make an immediate impact, it would be Malachi Richardson. I had a conversation with him a couple days ago at the Golden One Center. The kid is humble. He's ready. He's staying ready, which is the most important thing. And I mean, I'm not going to say what he told me, but just know this. When his number gets called, he will be ready. And guys that can shoot the rock like he can, those guys you have to hold on to. And then Scow had 9 points, 11 rebounds, but Scow had 4 turnovers. And just he was a guy that looked the most uncomfortable in this offense because Derek Martin tried to run something similar to what the Kings are running as far as a half-court high-post offense, but it just didn't work because these guys are not good enough, for one, and because they're not familiar enough to actually run this type of offense in the D-League. But once he started to speed up the game, they cut that 30-point lead into 8 or 6, and then it really never got past down 6. It was around 6 to 12 points throughout the second half. But, they made a nice comeback, and Malachi just caught fire. I think he had over 18 points in the second half, which is really good to see.
You talked about Malachi being the one to make the most immediate impact. I don't want to focus necessarily on immediate. I want to think long-term here, and long-term doesn't necessarily have to mean 3 or 4 years. I'm thinking even anywhere between 1 to 2 years. Take your bias out of it as much as you can. How are there pieces on this team? Is Malachi, is Scal, is Papa, are the 3 of them, or is any one of them someone that you can legitimately see? Now, it may be too early because we've only seen one game, but do they show sparks and signs of people that can actually come make a difference for this team and help alongside DeMarcus Cousins bring this Kings team out of this NBA purgatory?
Yeah, Scal and Malachi are those type of players that just have such a smooth game. Just overall, these kids are athletic. They're smart. Papa, I can't, if I'm being objective, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to be a great asset for this team because I don't know. Vlade doesn't know. He chose him based on potential, and he is a project. But if Scal gets stronger over the offseason, this guy can come next year and really make an impact because this guy just has a beautiful extension to a shot where he can get off a shot whenever he wants, and it's just so smooth. He has the hook shots already. He can just run that stretch four and be that stretch four. And then Malachi, he has that moxie, and that's something that Coach Dave Yeager said over the summer. He has this moxie about him, just a swagger that you really can't teach. This kid has it. I think he's going to be the biggest asset next year for sure. This year he might get his shot. We don't know. It just really depends if Ben McLemore gets injured or he gets traded. If either of those things happen, which I don't ever wish anyone to get hurt, but if that does happen, then you're going to see Malachi play 10 to 12 minutes a night, and you'll see those spurts where he shoots 2 to 3 shots a game. Like Ben McLemore this year has shot the ball at least a lot more confidently, or with a lot more confidence. Malachi will put up that shot just every single time, and you love to see that because that is your job, to be a shooting guard, and that's something that Ben hasn't been the past 2 years. He's extremely passive, and Malachi at the age of 20 is already just he's, I would say, more aggressive than Ben is right now, so that's a positive in its own.
Well, the Kings youngins getting work in Reno. And speaking of Reno, if you're a Kings or Reno Bighorns fan, and yes, you can be both because we are, if you're looking to watch your Kings rookies play with the Reno Bighorns this season, grab life by the horns and visit Don Ware's Reno Dodge dealership and earn big-time savings on your next 2016 Dodge Ram. Be sure to ask for the CK special to get 20% off of MSRP. And with the purchase of a new or used vehicle, you receive a 5-day 4-night cruise certificate for 2 to Mexico, the Bahamas, or the Western Caribbean. It really doesn't get any better than that, ladies and gents. Watching basketball, driving a Dodge Ram, and going on a terrific cruise, that's exactly what grabbing life by the horns is all about. Want to let you know the cruise certificate recipient is responsible for port charges, taxes, customs, and fulfillment fees, which is all to be expected. See cruise certificate for full details. And trust me, those fees pale in comparison to the value that you're getting just from that cruise alone. Not to mention you'll be driving a brand new just incredible to have the idea to visit Dodge Ram and to be driving one of those new trucks. It's an awesome deal. It's a great hookup if you're ever in Reno. Really considering that if you're considering getting a car, I definitely encourage you to check it out.
And it's only a 2-hour drive to Reno.
There you go, and then you get a nice 2-hour drive back in your brand new truck.
And it's a 7% tax rate over there.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point right there. I mean, to go.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify something about the D-League. Lamar Patterson just stuffed up the stat sheet. I think he had 23, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists, or something like that. And then Isaiah Cousins had 14 points. I want to clarify that the Kings do not own these players. So if the Atlanta Hawks reaches out to them and they can pretty much – any team can get them on a 10-day contract and sign them long-term for the rest of the year. See, those are things that as the D-League develops, I would like for all these players to belong to the Kings, because any of these players can at times, be some help for the Kings. And
like a AAA baseball system.
Yeah, exactly. So as of right now, they don't own the rights to Lamar Patterson or Isaiah Cousins, even though they played during the summer league, which they do own the 3 rookies that we know, which is Scal, Papa, and Malachi.
Well, man, this chat on our YouTube live stream, that's what it's called, YouTube live stream, whatever it is, this chat has been one step ahead of us the entire night, because now they're talking about the Sacramento Kings schedule. Someone said NBA always messes up Kings schedule, and someone responded, yeah, Matt Barnes said it perfectly about our schedule. And if you missed that, Matt Barnes basically said the Kings schedule is ridiculously tough. And
Hillary Clinton joined the show.
I know Hillary Clinton's on too, man. We're attracting all sorts of attention. Thank you, Miss Clinton, and awesome. Sorry about your loss. The Kings schedule has been difficult. There's no doubt about it. But we talked about this a lot on our morning show on KHDK, The Drive. Nate Goodyear actually brought it up. When you're a bad team, a schedule is going to seem a lot more difficult than when you're a good team, because when you're a bad team, suddenly 90% of the league is not games that you can see yourself winning, let alone road trips, or let alone tough matchups, back-to-backs at home. For example, the Sacramento Kings are on a 5-game homestand now as they return from a well-deserved 3 days off after their loss in Portland against the Trailblazers, an overtime loss, really a hard-fought game. I hate moral victories, so I'm not going to give them one. They lost. It's still a loss, although they bounced back nicely after that embarrassment against the Los Angeles Lakers. But for these next 5 games, Leo, they're taking on 5 proverbial playoff teams, with the exception of, I guess you can kind of put Houston on the bubble, although James Harden and company have been playing well. They are taking on the San Antonio Spurs on Wednesday. Then they have the Clippers on Friday. And then after that, they've got the Raptors. They've got the Houston Rockets. And then for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So it's going to be a tough homestand, really a good test for this team, because they'll get to take on some real quality opponents at home. And if they can use this 5-game homestand to kind of figure things out and turn it around and maybe win 3 or 4 of these games. 4 might be asking a little too much. If they're able to go over 500 on this 5-game homestand, suddenly you're feeling a lot better, because right afterwards, Kings are going on a 6-game road trip again. So the schedule is difficult. It's not favorable at all for the team, but you make your own luck in this league. And I think the Kings really have a good opportunity here in these next 5 games to come out and make some statements against some really good teams.
I was looking at the standings, and I saw that the Kings already had played 11 games, which most teams haven't even played 8.
Right.
And the Kings is the only team that has played 11, which is just ridiculous to me.
Yep.
And for fans to be upset, for the start, I mean, come on. They've played 11 games in 17 nights. And I hate to keep using this, but let's just be honest. If it wasn't for the refs, they'd be 6-5 right now. Like the Miami Heat game and the Blazer game, those games were more than winnable, and they should have won those games. So even at 4-7, with the type of schedule that they've had, I mean, last year they were 1-7.
And take the games that the refs may or may not have cost them out of it. And I say may not have to be politically correct, because you're more you are more agitated about it than I am. I prefer to not blame the referees as much as possible. Now, do I call officiating bad when I see it bad? Yes. And have we seen it bad this season? Absolutely. I don't put the sole amount of loss on the shoulders of the referee, because the Kings were the ones that put themselves in that position in the first place to allow themselves to lose the game because of referee calls.
But they're not that much better than these teams, so they have to be in those situations.
Well, okay, so you pointed out 2 games that the Kings lost because of officiating. I can raise you in 2, maybe 3 games to where the Kings lost because of poor late game execution. The Lakers game is a great one. Great. Same thing with the Trailblazers game, to be honest.
But they lost those games because those, like you said, they didn't execute. But when you start talking refs affecting the outcomes of a game, then to me that changes everything, Matt.
But if you're going to allow yourself to lose these games, or if you're going to claim that the refs cost you these 2 games, that how are you any less accountable for those when you're losing games like you did against the Lakers and against the Trailblazers with poor late game execution? You can't. The Sacramento Kings late game offense is horrendous. It's the same thing it's always been. The only difference between the Lakers game and the Trailblazers game was that the Kings were actually making their terrible shots. It was no different. It was Rudy Gay isolations and DeMarcus Cousins isolations down low with the other 3 or even 4 players standing around the perimeter watching. It's terrible offense, and it's the reason why the Kings continue to fall in the hole. Yes, the referees hurt the Sacramento Kings in that game in Miami. Absolutely. The 6 fouls or the 5 fouls against DeMarcus Cousins late are ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But that's the reputation he's built upon himself. The Kings need to know that, and then it's the next man up mentality that needs to carry that weight, and the Kings just don't do that. So I can't put all the weight on the shoulders. But if the Kings
are 6-5, you would be super positive, and so would 99% of Kings fans right now.
Because positivity has nothing to do with their late game execution.
I agree. I
can feel good about a team even when they're terrible. And the Kings have not been playing well late at all. They're awful. Leo, they are awful. The defense that we've heard so much about, that 94 to 96 points per game allowed that we saw in the early parts of the season, is gone. We really haven't seen that. And then late game, they're not doing a good job executing. They're falling into the same habits. So I'm going to blame the team first that I've seen over the past 5 years before I blame 2 games on referees.
And I agree with that. But if this team was 6-5, fans would not be so down right now, and wouldn't be calling for Vlade, you know, and the complexion is just different, because then you just iron out the kinks of the issues, of the root of the issue, which, like you said, it's late game execution. But at the same time, you have to play enough games to get better in those situations, Matt. And they've played 11 games. Yeah, give Dave Yeager a break.
Well, I will give Dave Yeager a break, certainly, and I will give the team a break because, yes, they are playing a lot. Yes, the schedule has been absolutely brutal, and you can already see the wear and tear on these guys 11 games into the season. Matt Barnes can barely take a step without wincing. DeMarcus Cousins is already banged and bruised because he has 4 guys on his back every time he attacks the basket. Rudy Gay has been playing phenomenally, but he's banged up a little bit. I mean, with that tough of a schedule and with how much they've been traveling on top of that, there's certainly a lot of reason to where this team can have those kind of excuses. So I don't discredit that. And I don't want people to think that I'm not accepting those as legitimate excuses, because in some case I can understand and I can respect it. I think this start to the season has been probably the worst schedule-wise out of everybody else in the league. There's not really comparable to it. So I'm not going to try and compare anything to it. But it's games like these on these 5-game homestands. It's games like this against the San Antonio Spurs. You had 3 or 4 days rest. You have zero excuse to come out flat. And historically, we've seen the Kings come out flat after these kind of days where they almost perform better, Leo, on back-to-backs after losing because they come out with a little bit of more energy and maybe being pissed off a little bit. Whereas I'm deathly afraid, Leo, that they're going to come out flat against this Spurs team because they've had the last 4 days off. That should be a positive, not a negative to this team.
We'll see what happens. But again, I just, the night of the Lakers defeat, DeMarcus Cousins called his team tender for just to be politically correct, because he was being interviewed by TNT alongside all of us. But again, Shaq claims that he's not a leader, but I beg to differ, because I know his teammates respect him, especially Matt Barnes, being the leader that he is, always acknowledging that the Kings have the best big in the game, that the Kings have their leader, and I like to hear that. So if Matt Barnes is saying that DeMarcus is their leader, I'm going to take his word for it and not a guy like Shaq who sits behind the desk and is really never in Sacramento. But we'll leave that for a different day. But I like how DeMarcus has composed himself in heated situations, especially this year. And I feel like that's a growth. That he's growing as a player, which is only a positive moving forward.
DeMarcus has grown as a leader in many different ways. There still are little areas that I can point to. I know multiple times during games I've said to whoever was sitting next to me in the media section, or maybe even to myself, because I'm weird like that.
Me too.
There are times where DeMarcus Cousins, instead of talking to the officials or instead of standing alone in a huddle, could put his arm around a Ben McLemore, or can go run down to the other end of the floor and come out and encourage some players, or tell them, okay, this is where I want you, in a way that's positive and uplifting, not him clapping his hands together and saying, move or get the hell out of my way because I have the ball in the post and you're bringing your man closer to me. A lot of players respond to that, and we don't know because we're not DeMarcus Cousins' teammates. Now, where has Cousins been a better teammate in my mind? It's off the bench, or should I say on the bench. Cousins on the bench has been phenomenal this year. And if you get the chance to go see a Kings game live, just watch when Cousins is on the bench how involved he is. Unless it's a blowout, we haven't really seen that yet. But he is up coaching, talking to his players, running out, giving them high fives during timeouts. Cousins has been a lot better in that sense, really picking me up. And I know the guys feed off of that because he is the leader in that sense. So that, I think, fans should be very proud of and very encouraged by. And I think DeMarcus has grown in strides, because past DeMarcus, we would have seen him come out of the game maybe frustrated with himself and would sit there and mope or complain or be upset and have that angry face on until he went back in. This DeMarcus Cousins, I've seen a couple of times, he gets subbed out of the game early because he's not performing as well, and he's up there cheering and rooting on and encouraging that bench unit, and it's a really nice thing to see.
Someone just said Cousins for Beal and Oubre plus 2 first-rounders. No. No.
Depends where the first-rounders are. I might think about it, but unlikely.
My God. Come on, Matt. This guy is so prone to injury. It's crazy, man.
Well, I mean, you got, like I said, you got to do something to get you out of purgatory. So if that's the move that needs to be made, I'm not saying do it. If both of those first-round picks were in the top 15, I'd consider it. Very likely they won't be, so most likely not. And again, that's really difficult to try and figure out what a good trade is, because in the long run, I don't think you're going to be 100% happy with any trade that you make involving DeMarcus Cousins. But I think you can put yourself in a situation to be pleasantly surprised versus a situation where you know you're going to get screwed over. So I think that's really what Vlade Divac has to look at. So we've covered a lot, though, in this podcast. We're just over an hour. We've had a lot of great feedback. The comments section is going absolutely crazy. Had a lot of great questions, a lot of great discussion, and we want that discussion to continue even after we go off air. You can join the conversation on Facebook, on Twitter. You can keep commenting on this video if you want. I'm sure plenty of people will see that. We will see that as well. And then for you audio listeners who are listening not live but later in advance, become just as much of the conversation as what we're having right now, because we see that and we love that feedback. We really enjoyed doing this new format here on this Monday, having the ability to go live. It adds so much of a new, more fun and more exciting and interactive element to the show, and we really appreciate you being a part of that. I know, Leo, you're very excited and happy with the direction that this is going, and we love that support.
Yeah, and we're not censored and we're not scripted, which is the best part, right? And that's the beauty of going live. And if we mess up, people are going to see it. And I'm not afraid of it, because I'm just a no nonsense type of guy, and I'm gonna tell you the way it is, and so are you, Matt.
Dan B, we appreciate your compliment there. Great conversation, guys. I like this channel. I appreciate that a lot. We hope that you can stick around and continue to like it and become a bigger part of it. Attract as many Kings fans as you know. Say, hey, I know these two goons, and they like to talk Kings basketball, and sometimes they actually make a little bit of sense. Why don't you listen to them? We would appreciate that feedback as well. And again, we're here to serve you guys and to join you in the conversation, to come alongside you as Kings fans and Kings media. We believe that there should be a coalition between the two. It should not be one looking up to the other or one looking down on the other, because that's not what this is all about. We are out there to serve you guys and bring you guys the information as best as possible. And then Leo and I and many other members of the Sacramento media who are attached to this team or have seen the journey that this team has been on, or in my case has grown up with this team, we also have that attachment as well, very similar to many of you out there. So we're all in this together, man, and we want nothing more than to see this team get back to the glory days, because that does a lot for our jobs. That helps us get more exposure and gives us a lot more fun things to cover, and then that would make this city popping again. I could not imagine. I was sitting next to Morgan Reagan during the Kings-Lakers game, and I turned to her. I can't remember at what point. I think it was right before the fourth quarter when Scott Freshour always comes up and fires up the crowd, and I'm really pleased with how loud Golden One Center gets, because that was one of my major worries after leaving Arco or Sleep Train or whatever, Power Balance. Ugh. But how cool would it be? We need to have playoff basketball in the Golden One Center, and it needs to be before I'm a grandfather. So
yeah, let's not be like that lady that was 108 years old, passed away 6 days after the Cubbies
awesome story,
won.
Though.
Yeah, that was such a great story. Just please, Kings, don't do this to us. Don't make us wait until we're 108 years old, please.
Someone suggested Jamal Crawford and Mo Spates for Rudy Gay. I would take that in a heartbeat. No chance it happens, but I would take that trade in an absolute heartbeat. I don't know how you weigh on that, Leo.
Someone else said on Instagram, Klay Thompson for DeMarcus. Klay Thompson, the first and the second for DeMarcus Cousins.
I would think about it. I really would.
I would too. I'm not gonna lie.
I would really think about it just because of the player Klay's been. But God, would it suck? Like, I know the Lakers are also very interested in DeMarcus Cousins as well. If we trade DeMarcus, I shouldn't say we. I'm not part of the organization. If the Kings trade DeMarcus Cousins, I want him to be as freaking far away from the Kings as possible, because you know his first game back in the Golden One Center is going to be a 50-point just explosion of DeMarcus Cousins-ness. So, boy, let's hope we don't see that one day, but, who knows?
But the best talent, is in the West, Matt. And if they do trade him, I think they're going to get, more for their money in the West, even though you're right. You don't want to see him again, and you only want to see him twice a year. But the West is packed. It's full of talent, and I can see them going to the Warriors just because of what has transpired in this past year. They need a center. The Kings need a shooter. It would make complete sense. But again, if Boogie were to go to the Warriors, they would have won the championship for the next 5 years. We're
gonna end the show with this. Xis Picks. I think that's how you pronounce your name. If I butchered it, I apologize. XIS Picks. Still early. Give it 25 games to make a fair assessment.
Hey, I've said that.
I agree with you there. Well, shut up. You're not X's Picks. So 25 games. That's a pretty good line, and we'll see where this team is at that point.
He's paying attention to my stories.
Or he just has common sense. But hey, we can.
I've been preaching. Common sense, ladies and gentlemen. Wait, give this a 25-game barometer, and then we can judge this team.
The worst part about this all, ladies and gentlemen, is that he controls the control board, so I can't even mute him, which is unusual for me because I'm usually controlling the board of the morning show on KHDK. Yeah. So if Dave or Nate or Katie are going on their spiel, one button, they're off the air. Bummer. Goodbye. Can't do that with Leo. We got to get that fixed. But thank you guys again for joining in. We look forward to having you next week for another episode of the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. Join us after the Kings and Spurs on Wednesday, and then after the Kings and Clippers on Friday, as we'll have the CK Nation post-game show. Hopefully we're positive and happy after both of those. Boy, how cool would it be to see the Kings beat the Spurs or beat the Clippers or both? Maybe. Don't get your hopes too high up. But hey, we will be out there to cover it as best as possible, and we hope that you can join us. So until then, for my partner, Leo Beas, my name is Matt George. We can't wait to hear from you and have you join the conversation. We love you guys. We appreciate all your support, and we can't wait until next week. But for right now, this has been the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. streaming live on CowboyKingdom.com.